Hello everyone, and welcome back to our final episode of Talking Tents for 2020. And this is our RaceSpotTV podcast that we've been delighted to bring you for the first time this year. Thank you for joining us either live across RaceSpot's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch, or through the audio version released the very same day through a podcast app of your preference. As always, my name is Arjuna Kankipadi, and I'm joined by veteran esports commentator Connery Maddock, with Hugo Luis in the production booth controlling all of the action. And we've got a special show, Connery. We've decided to round up a few of our RaceSpot colleagues and bring them up into the booth with us, and we're going to have a little bit of fun here talking about the year that was 2020, and what a year it was. So many different things, and sim racing as a whole has really exploded onto a scene.
Yep, it really has, and of course, for better or for worse, it's the silver lining to the very dark clouds that has been this year of 2020. It's given an opportunity for sim racing to really stand in the spotlight somewhat, while real-life racing ground to the whole at sort of towards the beginning of this year. It's given us a little bit of a boost, but you know, we've got to carry that on over into 2021 now.
Absolutely, and let's then kick it off by bringing in our NASCAR correspondent, Evan Posocco. We're going to get to the the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup side of things in just a few seconds' time, but let's kick it off by bringing in Evan, because, Evan, you had a fantastic year. There were so many different milestones. You were on TV with Fox Sports as part of the eNASCAR Pro Invitational, but I think this year for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola Series, $300,000 on the line, one of the more interesting championships we've seen over the many years of pro NASCAR virtual racing, and Nick Ottinger going on to become the champion. What a storyline out there in that championship.
It is, because, you know, one thing that we've talked about a lot with this series in the last few years is how there's the new blood, right? This series is more competitive than it's ever been, because you have so many people trying to qualify in through Road to Pro and through the Pro Series that oftentimes we think, yeah, you know, you've got those guys like Ottinger who have been around for some time, but the storylines are kind of, you know, the Ryan Luzas who come in the last couple of years and get a win. And you have the guys like Alfala, like Conti, guys who are in the mix this year that are there, but most of the time we talk about the young blood. So it was great to see somebody like Nick be able to be in this series for so long. And hey, listen, anytime you get a first-time champion, right, it's a great storyline. But Nick was the highest driver in this series as far as old-time wins list without a championship thus far, so he was due. And now I think we're at a point where I don't know if there's one driver that jumps out over the rest as somebody who's due, right? Nick Ottinger was due, and it was great to see him get that championship. But I know that you guys alluded to, of course, it was a busy year in sim racing when all the real-life stuff shut down, right? And sim racing had to be a big part of that. And obviously a lot of the pro drivers came over onto the sim, and you know, you had stuff like that eNASCAR Pro Invitational and other things, but it did help out viewership for the Coke Series, right? I mean, at one point in April and May, the viewership was 3 times what it was in February and March. So it was certainly an advantage to take of, and I think that it was the best season yet. And as you mentioned, the $300,000 doesn't hurt, right? Once upon a time, $10,000 was a lot, and nowadays that's a single race payout. So the prize money is starting to be there for sim racing, and this series included.
And it's so cool seeing the real teams involved. But let's talk about Ottinger's season for a moment here, because he started off very promisingly with that second place finish at Daytona, but it took him a while to really get his legs under him, I feel. He won then at Dover, that locked himself into the playoffs, and it was a very consistent run to finish off the regular season. Multiple podium positions, and then you get into the playoffs, and he really steps up, I think. And while someone like Bobby Zelensky was really looking very strong in the playoffs, I think for Nick to go out there and, like you say, so many wins on the all-time win list, it was important for him to get this championship now, because it's going to really build his confidence going into next year as well.
And this format means that you can have a little bit of a slow start, right? Is it nice to get a P2 at Daytona? Yes. Is it make or break? No. And we've seen drivers in the past, somebody like Aluza, for the last handful of years, he's won at least 3 races. oftentimes they come early, right? I mean, cars are a little bit different. You have a different build, a little bit of a different package as NASCAR kind of toys with what they're doing with the Cup cars. And Luz is real good at adapting right away. He comes out, he gets a bunch of wins. Whereas at the end of the season, when the rest of the field starts to catch up, that's where he struggled for consistency and found himself in a championship 4 spot. But that's where Ottinger thrives, right? He's the veteran. He had a good year. I'm not going to say that it was the best year that we've ever seen, but in this format, you just need to get to that finale at Homestead. Now, granted, the round of 8 isn't any walk in the park either, because you only have those 3 rounds to either get a win or be in the top 4 in points to get to that championship race. But you do have a little bit of leeway in terms of what can I learn over the 16 race regular season, and then those 3 races in the round of 8 to set yourself up for a 1 race championship, right? That's a very uniquely NASCAR thing, even here on the sim, is 1 race to determine a champion. And listen, they played that race perfectly. I can go back to that Homestead race and visualize like 4 or 5 different ways that race actually ends, and we have different champions, right? Of course, there was the big moment up front when you had Luz leading the race. Bobby Zalenski gets into him. At that point, on strategy, Nick was kind of back. Yellows come, he has the tire advantage, and he actually ends up, making a pass for $100,000, on the last restart of the race. I mean, this is quintessential NASCAR, right? These are the moments in real life that people look back on 20, 30 years down the line, and it all happened in the sim this year. And, not supposed to be biased. You want everybody to have an even playing field. There's, all sorts of people on the service. There's even, more thousands and thousands that just want to get in this series. So it's big enough of an accomplishment as is to be one of those 40 guys. It's even more difficult to be one of those 40 guys consistently, right? Year over year. So you're not supposed to pick favorites, but I think Nick was due, and it's certainly a well-deserved title.
Yeah, just take us back to the end of that Homestead race, the final race of the season. It's when everything comes to a head. 4 drivers in with a chance. Whoever finishes ahead takes it all. And I remember the end of that race quite vividly, or at least the last sort of quarter of that race, because I have never, ever, ever in my life, for a sim racing race, felt that excitement or felt that tension. Really, it's the only thing I've experienced in other esports and in other real-life sports. I never experienced something personally in sim racing that was that visceral in a way, and that just sealed it for me and said that sim racing, is, I've always known it that it's, going to be its own standalone esport and its own thing, and it's, stands on its own 2 feet. But that moment was kind of incredible. How was it in the booth? Because that must have been crazy when Zelensky and Loser came together in those final runs to the checkered flag, and then of course all those restarts afterwards as well. That must have been crazy for you, especially knowing how potentially monumental that moment was.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to. I mean, I always weigh, what's more important, to be able to say that you're a NASCAR champion or to get $100,000, right? That's kind of tough to say what's more important. I guess it comes down to who you're asking. But a lot of people will say in kind of those big moments, and it's a cliche, I think, that like everything happened in slow motion, but it was true. Because we had those cautions and the restarts. And it's not like, Nick caught us by surprise. At that one point, we thought it was going to be between Bobby Zelensky and Ryan Luza, because they're 1-2, they're on each other's bumper, closing laps of the race. And then obviously, Luza gets wrecked. And I think that was one of the best sim racing TV moments ever. Yeah. And it just happened to be really good timing for us, because as that wreck happened, we had both of their live driver cameras on the broadcast. It's not like we're cutting to them 5-10 seconds after the wreck, right? I mean, we see Bobby just start saying, "Oh my God," as soon as he did it, and you can kind of see Luz's disbelief and disgust. That, I think, is like the sim racing moment of the decade, at least for this series. Just because the way it timed with us having their cameras, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, that was absolutely incredible, and I'm so thankful that we have the cams on for the World Championship Series now, because there's a chance that we get to catch something like that, and to catch something like that in the final race of the season, of the biggest eNASCAR season, yeah, that was Absolutely incredible, and it's those personal moments that viewers can really attach to. You know, that they see the reactions. You know, even a couple of years ago, it was just, for a lot of people, it was just cars going around the circuit, and there was no connection to any of the drivers. You know, it's you know, how can you be a fan of someone if you don't see them, if you don't know their face? You know, but that sort of moment was. I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up in some compilation highlights or just NASCAR in general highlights, because that was absolutely crazy. And it's those sorts of moments that make just sporting events great. You know, it's those storylines, it's those human moments that really drive the emotion home, because, you know, us as commentators, we can convey the emotion as much as we want, but it's the pictures that do the talking, really. And to have that, and to have a good example like that is just absolutely crazy for me.
And having it live is the best part, right?
Yeah.
We could take a feed of, you know, someone's webcam and edit it into a thing after the race and upload it. And, you know, this is what they did when this happened. Just not the same, right? Of you seeing it in that moment, because you're experiencing that moment with them. And this is something that I talked with Tim Clark a little bit about, who's one of the top digital guys at NASCAR, in terms of, you know, how do we get people to care about this series? Because there is no, you know, physical danger, so there is no risk or kind of aura there. So why do people care? And as you mentioned, you know, even up to 3-4 years ago, there's a name behind these drivers, but we had to clarify on a lot of the broadcasts, right? If somebody was new, they might just think it's AI racing, right? Like, they don't know these are all real people at home. They don't know the process these drivers went through to get to this series. I remember when the biggest thing that came to the Coke Series broadcast was that we had pictures of the drivers on the lower thirds. Like, that was the most connection we could get. When you get the cameras, people have a reason to care, because they know the human behind that. And I go back to what I said about what's more important, right? The championship or the money? I think the answer is yes. I can't tell you which one, so I'll just say yes. Last 2 years, with Zach last year on NBC, and then with Nick as well this year, you know, as soon as they win that championship, instantly cut to their feed, right? And they're broken down in tears. That's never something we've been able to see before. It's happened. That emotion's been there for all 10 years of this series, right? But we've never been able to see that. So I think the driver cams have been the biggest plus in terms of, you know, the eNASCAR broadcasts, because there's no other, like, I can tell you he's crying, but let's show you, right? Like, that human connection is why people will care. If we can't say, you know, this virtual car that you're watching, if we can't turn that virtual car into a kid from, you know, this state, and he does this job and he wants to do this in his life, and someone may like, you know, hey, he cheers for my favorite NASCAR driver, so I like him. Oh, he's from my state. You know, there needs to be some sort of connection, that human element. Without that, then no one's going to watch.
It's not just that shot of the emotion on the driver's face for me. It's the shot of their family coming in from behind. I saw that with Novak last year, and I almost started tearing up myself.
This year as well with Nick,
It was amazing. And that, I think, like you say, it's about getting people invested. That's one of the things we want to do here as well, is get drivers over here, talk to them in longer forms, you know, discover why they got into sim racing, what makes them tick, you know, the things that you can't do with the 3 questions you get in a post-race interview either. But I want to move it on very slightly, Evan, to talk about the competition level and start looking forward to next year as well, because I think next year is going to be even crazier. It's we just had the final Pro Series race last night, so we're already knowing potentially what the drivers' lineups are looking like going into next season. And I just think that, given what we saw at that finale, this is the first time in this format where we have playoffs that the championship winner didn't win the race as well. And I think that cannot be overlooked. Chris Shearburn coming through at the final race of the season to step up and take that race victory. It's a great story in and of itself, and I think it has to make us turn our attention towards the rest of your contenders here, because they weren't content in that championship finale to just sit down and let the focus be on the championship 4.
Yeah, for so long we've kind of assumed that it's a given, right? That whoever ends up winning the championship is going to have to win the race. And honestly, for much of that race, that's how I thought it was going to be. At many points, we had those championship 4 cars run 1, 2, 3, 4 in the running order. And to their credit, they all had opportunities up front. You had Bobby and Nick and Ryan and all those guys, in a position to win the race, depending on maybe how the yellows fell and how the strategy went. And you can give these drivers this format where you have 4 drivers with an equal shot at the title, and it can be a stinker of a last race, right? One guy could run away, the rest of them can finish at the bottom half of the top 10, and that's it. But they ran close enough, and I think that goes to show you that all 40 drivers in this field are here to win. And I mentioned it earlier, I think one of the most rewarding parts about seeing Nick Ottinger get the title this year was that he's been around for so long, right? And there's all this young blood coming in. I said it last year. I said it the year before, and I can bet you I said it the year before that the following year is going to be the most difficult. And I think we saw that these past couple of weeks with the offseason with the Pro Series, right? Because there was a handful of veteran drivers who have been in this series for quite some time that will not be back next year, right? You got guys like Santiago Gutierrez, I'll just go through the list, Brandon Cattell, Chris Overland, Alex McCollum, Michael Gariglia, you got Justin Bolton, Eric Smith, Colin Keister, Jarl Tien, and Steve Sheehan that are gone. That's almost a quarter of the field that's going to be replaced by rookies, right? The exact number, I'm just taking a look at, because I think we're going to have one extra driver. We're actually going to bring 21 in from the Pro Series for next year. So I think the actual number comes to 11 new drivers, right? So those are rookies. A quarter of your field is rookies. And we were just saying how tough last year's field was, right? It's only going to get more and more. And I think that the biggest point I always make is a lot of those vets, they came from NR 2003 and some of the older sims. When they got into sim racing, they didn't get into it saying, all right, I'm going to go race for $300,000, right? They did it for fun. And they ended up at the top ranks. And then when these opportunities opened up, they were right there at the front of the line, per se. Nowadays, you have people dedicating time, some of them full time, to this. And it's going to ensure, I think, with the format, I know that not necessarily everybody thinks it's the greatest. I love the format as far as, you use Road to Pro, and I think it's going to be snake splits this upcoming year, then into the Pro Series in the offseason, and then to the Coke Series. I think the relegation aspect of this series makes it the most competitive, I'd argue, in most of sim racing.
I think you're going to have a bit of a competition there from the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup guys, but
I'm a little bit biased, so
I'm sure just like Paul and Hugo will be in a few moments' time. Let's take a look at the list of drivers. Like you say, 21 drivers getting promoted up. That's because Christian Challoner, who was finished in the top 20 of the Coca-Cola Series last year, has joined the iRacing staff, and as we understand it, that makes him ineligible for next year. But you take a look there, some interesting drivers. The big name that always stands out for me is Mitchell de Jong, who is now a multi-disciplined World Championship driver who competes in 3 different World Championships. So 2021 is going to be a big year for the American, but Evan, I think the big storyline here is Isaac Gahn, who, at least to me, is a complete newcomer to the series. However, he's gone out there and really shown out there on Podium Esports and their broadcast of the Pro Series exactly what speed he's going to bring into the series next year.
And his, big thing was that he got better as the Pro Series went on. He clinches that championship over Ashton Crowder, who's going to get back into the series once more after falling out at the top 20 at the end of last season. He wins this title by winning the last 2 weeks of the season. So that's clutch. Guess what kind of, performance and point structure that would fit well into? The eNASCAR one, right? Where it promotes being at your best at the end of the season. And, Isaac Gahn's been somebody who's been in the top level of sim racing for quite some time, but I think everybody in the Pro Series thinks this is my year. And then they're a little bit surprised when they finish 25th or 30th and they don't make the cut. And for Isaac, it all came together. Had the speed, had the consistency. He wasn't somebody who started up front and just led the whole race and that was it. Right? He had to be good on the long runs. He had to improve the car. And I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Like I said, you had guys like Luzu who came in a couple of years ago and found immediate success. That's not always guaranteed. To finish in the top 20 of the Pro Series is to naturally be in the bottom 20 of the Coke Series, right? In terms of pecking order, because you're beating the bottom half of the field. So it is a step up. And the other thing is, as well, it's a totally different car, right? I mean, still in this age, and I don't know what it's going to be like in 3 years, what it's going to be like in 5 years, but the Cup car drives totally different than the Xfinity Series car. We've seen that with Ray Alfala, who at least last year really struggled, and last year, I mean 2019, really struggled in the Coke Series and got relegated, went down to the Pro Series, won the championship, right? Cleaned house. And he did improve in the Cup Series this year in 2020, but I don't want to understate the dynamic between the B car and the A car and how that might not necessarily directly translate. You could be great in the B car, you could be okay in the A car. But effort's not going to be a question. All these Pro Series guys, Isaac Hand included, have been waiting for this moment for those 11 rookies for so long. They're going to take advantage of this. It'll probably take a couple of weeks into next year. Daytona's kind of always a wash, but I think once we get through 3 or 4 rounds, we'll have an idea of, do these guys have a real shot? Unless anything changes, which I haven't heard, I think the plan is, still going to be that 2-round, 8-driver playoff format. I'd think at least 1, if not 2 of those 8 spots are by rookies. And the number could be higher, right? You can old takes expose me later if it is. But it's tough to be into the top 8 because, again, naturally, you're supposed to be the bottom 20 because you're beating the bottom half of last year's field. Going to be a bit different. You mentioned earlier all the NASCAR teams involved. There's going to be a lot of shuffling around now that we have drivers who were on teams that have fallen out. We no longer draft drivers, right? It's free agency. So I'm curious to see what the movement's going to be this year. It's only December, and I'm already for the season opener. It's been fun watching the Pro Series and having a couple of weeks off, but I'm ready to get back into it for 2021, and it should be a great season of racing. Super looking forward to it. There's so many storylines, and if you don't watch NASCAR a lot or any of the oval stuff on the sim, come check it out, right? Because, Virginia, you mentioned, those multifaceted drivers. I mean, Bobby Zalenski's kind of been the poster child for that the last few years, but you got Mitchell DeYoung, who finished top 3, I think it was, in the Pro Series points this year, so he's going to be in the mix, and no surprise that he was able to execute this year either. So there are so many connections to other parts of sim racing, and of course, it sounds like if we follow anything like what NASCAR did, a lot of road racing, which could certainly help the likes of Zelensky and others. So it'll be curious to see if that streak can get broken, and it'll be fun to see who's next to get that $100,000 check at the end of the year.
Okay, so coming into 2021, of course, knowing that 2020 was a little bit of a standout year and no one could really have predicted it with the whole pandemic situation giving the numbers a boost and the awareness a boost. How do you think should we capitalize on that coming into 2021? Because at some point this pandemic's going to be over, hopefully sooner rather than later, but you never know. This year might go on for another month or so yet, because that seems like a very 2020 thing to do. But how would you try and capitalize on this raised awareness now and try to keep viewers rather than try to go actively seeking for them? Because that's the sort of thing that will mean that the series continues to get support years into the future if there's a consistent fan base. So how would you build on what has already been done in 2020?
I think one of the biggest things that has helped, at least over the last few years, is NASCAR's increased social media presence, right? I mean, NASCAR has a huge resource on social media, and this series has been sanctioned by them the whole time, right? But they didn't always post a lot about it. And I think that the digital team has really helped by, posting 20 times at points in any NASCAR race. I mean, that's how a NASCAR fan, even if they're a casual fan, maybe if they don't even watch the Coke Series, at least they've heard of it, right? And I'm biased, but I always think that the next step is to put it on TV. And I think that Tuesday nights works really good because you have all your NASCAR programming on the weekends. What are we going to show on a Tuesday night, right?
Yeah, but there's also you saw a tweet, I think it was from Mr. Stern himself, that said they could potentially run eNASCAR broadcasts or iRacing related broadcasts during the practice sessions. Isn't that an idea that chimes with you at all?
So I have some intel on that, but I'm not allowed to share it. So I'll just I'll zip the lips on that for now.
Spill, Evan.
No, but I think that's the next step, or at least on radio, something to give these guys more exposure. I mean, digital's a huge thing, right? You can get hundreds of thousands of viewers on Twitch, on Facebook, on YouTube. That's good. But I think that, the next step is to incorporate these drivers into more things. I know that the Richmond Raceway Esports always kind of do little mini commercial skits with their drivers. I want to see some of that. I want to see these NASCAR guys, the eNASCAR guys on NASCAR Sirius XM NASCAR radio, right? Utilize them, because a lot of them aren't just sim racers, right? I mean, they have a lot of real life experience. I know Eric J. Smith, who won't be rejoining the series next year, has a technical position and an engineer position with the NASCAR Cup Series team. So these guys are really smart. Let's utilize them, right? Have them on, NASCAR radio shows on Sirius XM. Have them on, the little YouTube pre-race show for the race weekend, and introduce them as, this is the driver that drives in this series, and then let them just talk about racing. We don't want sim racing and real life racing to be separate. If we keep the sim racing guys away from the real cars and the real guys away from the sim cars, then you don't have that mix. And again, you need people to care. So we need to get our drivers, I think, in front of more people and relate them to the real life crowd, because I've seen tons of comments on social media this year where people thought when they were watching the iRacing stuff, they were watching real racing, right? They're like, wait, I thought NASCAR wasn't racing right now. You just need to open the door for those people. And they may be skeptical, they may be pessimistic at first, but when we had that big boom when sim racing was the only thing there, I saw a lot of comments on Facebook, a site where it tends to skew a little older, where a lot of people said, hey, I've heard about this, I never really cared, but that was cool. I'm tuning in next week. I think that if you get it in front of people, people will watch it. We just need to see what groups we can get it in front of and how I think we can use our drivers outside of Tuesday nights is the biggest thing. We can have fun on Tuesdays all we want. We can put on great shows, have great racing. But if nobody hears from our drivers from Wednesday to Monday, then it's not as legitimized, if you will. So I think that's the next step, if you ask me, is kind of use these drivers in more promotional stuff and get them out there and use them in some of NASCAR properties, so you kind of control where they can go. And it's easy enough to get them on NASCAR radio, right? NASCAR makes a call, it's done, I would like to think. So I think using these drivers more in broadening the series from outside of just Tuesday night would be great.
Well, I think Brandon Catello is tweeting, trying to get into the, at least booth for the virtual races. So there's at least some start on that. Quick final point before we want to move on to our other world championship that we want to talk about, Evan. Let's look at the, 19 drivers that have locked themselves in from last year's season as well. And let's talk about some of the favorites in your mind. We obviously have the championship 4, the Ottingers, Zelenskis, Conti's losers, but a name there that I think is going to be interesting is someone like a Graham Boland. He's someone who's very, very well respected. He's got a lot of speed, but I feel a little bit inconsistent last season. This will be one year where he wants to try and maybe improve on that. And also Casey Curwood, who squeaked back into the top 20 with a heroic last couple of laps in that final race of the season. These are drivers who have slowly been improving, and I think this might be the season where things maybe come together for a championship hunt.
There's several guys who have those moments of brilliance, right? At one point, I thought Casey was gonna be a playoff driver. Kind of halfway through the regular season, then he had a bit of a rough stretch and then was able to fight back literally to the last lap, last corner to get himself in. And not just Graham, but I think there's other drivers I put Brad Davies in the mix, even a Corey Vincent, right? Those are drivers who it seems like they're either in the top 5, in the top 10, or just on an off night. And I think that they have the speed. There's no doubt in that. And now they're vets, right? Once you've been in it, I can't really, give you the excuse of being, kind of young and inexperienced. So there's probably a dozen guys, those names we talk about that we're thinking, okay, can they make that next step from a top 15 or a top 10 car to a top 10 or a top 5 car? The problem is a lot of our top drivers aren't going away, right? You got Garrett Lowe, who was a championship 4 driver 2 years ago. I think he's got a great chance of getting back there. You got Michael Conti, who was able to get into the championship for this year. Is he going to be able to repeat that? Because the year before was a little bit of a miss, right? I mean, some of these can come down to moments in a single race that determines if you're a playoff driver or not, and kind of how we look back on your season could be dictated by one race or two races. But you're going to have Luza. There's no doubt. You're going to have Zelensky. Will Nick Ottinger come back, or will he have a little bit of a championship hangover like Zach Novak had? Novak won the title last year, didn't even make the top 20 this year, right? He just qualified back in for the Pro Series. So you've got champions in that group of drivers coming back into this series. With the 8-car playoff, it is just so difficult, and there is such a small margin for error. If we had a 16-car playoff like NASCAR does in the Cup Series, totally different story. You can be that Ryan Newman or whoever else is kind of that P15-ish car, get into the playoffs, get a win. Next thing you know, you're top 12. Somebody has an incident, you're in the top 8, right? The net is not that wide in this series. So it would be great to see, the guys I think of. You got Vincent. I think Clampett could take a big step as well. I mentioned Boland already. So even somebody like a Bob Bryant, those drivers have those moments of brilliance. Could they take that next step? And even if they do take that next step, is it enough when you're already going to have, your championship 4 drivers from this year obviously shooting to take those spots again next year?
I guess the big question in my mind is, can anyone really do a Matt Crofton and win a title without actually winning a race? That will be something we have to look out for, Evan. But thanks for joining us for this first portion of the show. Don't go anywhere. We want you back for the final couple of moments where we wrap up 2020 and maybe talk about what a year it's been for RaceSpot as well. But eNASCAR Coca-Cola, what a year 2020 was. And I think 2021, like you said, the field keeps getting stronger and it should be even bigger than before.
We say it every year. It's going to be the biggest year ever. As far as I know, we're still sitting at $300,000, right? There's so much to love about that. So, it's been awesome talking to you guys about it. Looking forward to the end of the show. But I'll re-pitch my pitch from earlier. Even if you're not an oval guy, even if you're not a NASCAR guy, there are connections with these drivers to other parts of sim racing. It's a great time on Tuesday night. So check us out in 2021.
And hopefully on TV. So that's Tuesday nights. But let's now turn our attentions to Sundays, or rather Saturdays. I get a little bit confused sometimes. Porsche Tag Car Esports Super Cup. But before we get to this, let's bring in our experts, Hugo Luis and Paul Smith. But a little bit of an intro before we get there. Paul, I didn't know this until yesterday, but once upon a time, many a moon ago, you were an ITV4 Kung Fu man. So Hugo has very kindly queued up the clip for us, and everyone who's watching live now on our video feeds is about to get treated to a very nice surprise.
Thank you very much.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Hugo's panicking. He's trying to get it all set up here, but he's... Listen, thing that you ought to know here, Arjuna, this that you're about to see is still being used on TV every single day of the week, and it's been going. Next year will be in January next year. It'll be the 8th year that they've been using this. I've been appearing on British TV for 8 years now. Hopefully, Hugo will be ready and give us a thumbs up as to when he's ready. I'm padding here. See, this is what we call in the industry padding, which is just filling time with incoherent nonsense.
Well, which
is what I talk about most of the time anyway.
Well, I can jump in with some coherence because I didn't know you also got flown out to Cape Town for this very clip. So this is a very interesting 30 seconds. For a 30-second clip, you got flown out to Cape Town.
Yes, I did. Put up in a 5-star hotel. It was a tremendous. I said it at the time when I was asked to give some words about it. I was pinching myself. It was an incredible opportunity, and all it took was just filling in an application form that I saw on because they were advertising during the touring car finale back in 2012. So, yeah, it's it's quite the thing to still get messages from friends going, "Oh, seeing your face again." Yeah, it's quite the thing. Here we go, Hugo. I think Hugo's got it now. So come on, bring it on, roll it on. Come on.
That moment where you're upside down and he's fake kicking you while trying to also flip you back up. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be an outtake. Turned out it was the real thing that they used. So,
well, there we go. A little bit of enjoyment for everyone who was watching along with our live feeds. Paul Smith, who you can watch live on ITV4 every day, as it turns out right now. But let's jump into it then and talk about the season that was and the crowning of a new champion. And Paul, I'm going to start with you. Sebastian Job, you had the pleasure of witnessing his charge to the title in the commentary booth, and what a consistent season it was for him. One bad round in a 10-round season is unbelievable. And, you know, he's going to be taking that number one number onto his car next year. We're only a couple of weeks away from the first round of the championship. I can't wait to get back and see if Sebastian Job can defend this world championship.
Yeah, 9th of January, it's absolutely flown by us this off-season. I'm that professional, I got my little notebook out and made some notes. Sebastian had 13 podiums, 4 feature race wins, 2 sprint race wins. Compare that to Josh Rogers, his nearest rival, only 7 podiums and only 3 feature race wins. He did not win a single sprint race, did Josh. I think that shows the level that Sebastian was at last year. But me and Connery, because Connery was working on the commentary booth in 2019, we saw the start of this about halfway through that season with Sebastian. We saw that upward trend of how he was getting on, and I just felt going into that season that it was his year. We sort of had a little message before the first round of the championship, and I says, "Hey, this is Job's year." After watching how they got on in the media day this year, so yeah, it was tremendous. It was well deserved. I raced against, I shared a track with Sebastian Job back in 2015 when he raced in the British Sim Racers Touring Car Championship, and he was an incredible talent then. He was only 14 or 15, something like that. Unbelievable the speed that he could get out of a car. And yeah, it was. I wasn't always happy with his behaviour on track, but yeah, you could see the talent in him. It was that experience that he needed to get in the consistency, and he's finally reached that peak.
Yeah, I remember. Oh,
sorry, Connor, I'm going to jump in here. It's not just consistency, it was maturity. It was the way that he evolved, he grew up, he put himself in the right positions. And Connery, I want to come to you with a specific question here, because Brands Hatch, you had the privilege of leading your first World Championship broadcast, and you got to see Job recover from what was a very inopportune opening start to that race. He got shoved off the track and then had to fight back through the field. Some fantastic passing opportunities to get back towards the front of your field. And I think that was one of the races where you saw that transition from last year, where he was a challenger, to this year really making his mark on a championship.
Yeah, that was the point in the season where he was the front runner. But that round, he was at risk of losing so many points to Josh Rogers, who could have really taken that advantage into the next couple of rounds coming towards the end of the season and made more of a fight of it coming into Monza. But the fact that he was able to claw his way back through the field and minimize that points loss to Josh Rogers, especially in that main race, finishing on the podium third, whereas Josh, won the race. Still not an ideal situation, but it could have been so much worse. He could have been outside the top 10. He could have been outside the top 20 and hemorrhaged a ton of points, which would have made it much closer by the end of the season. So, like you said, Ayuna, that was the mature drive that we've sort of been waiting for. Of course, he's had good results up until that point, but at that point, he could have really panicked and just blew it all out of the water. But he was able to stabilize, he was able to stay comfortable, and he was able to go forward. And that is what you want in a driver that does not get shaken whenever something happens to them.
And don't forget as well, at the start of that Brands Hatch feature race, yes, he got hit, but he also accidentally hit his pit limiter as well, which hindered his recovery immediately as well. So don't forget that as well in that incident.
Well, a question then, I'll start with Connery and then I'll ask Paul to answer it as well. Let's talk about Red Bull in general, because I think that unit, we saw impressive drives from both Graham Carroll and Patrick Holtzman as well in part of that trio. But recent news that the German Holtzman is going to be leaving for Pastures New. Now it just leaves the 2 Red Bull cars in the mix. But it's two very strong cars, and I think both Graham Carroll and Sebastian Job showed that strength at the BMW Sim Live 120 finale as well, where both drivers were up towards the front of the field in terms of overall pace. It's going to be more difficult for them, though, because now it's just two cars against what is a onslaught of 11 Coanda machines. And Connery, we talked about this in the past in terms of how we don't necessarily like that 11 drivers can all come from the same team, but it is going to benefit the purple and orange at the end of the day. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic next year.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting for many reasons. Of course, you have some fantastic rookies coming through that we got the chance to talk to at the end of the Porsche Media Day, and those clips will obviously be played throughout the entirety of next season. But for Coanda, of course, the numbers advantage, it's going to work in their favor. They'll claim that it doesn't, matter too much, but the more friends that you have out there on circuit, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But of course, we're coming into 2021. We've also have that rule change of the reverse grid not being from qualifying anymore as well. So I wonder how that's going to factor into things. I don't think the team situation will affect that too much, but it's just another spicy element being thrown in, so that we'll see perhaps some other drivers rise to the top. I think that actually does work out in Josh Rogers' favor, actually, because he doesn't have to try and he never held back in qualifying anyway because of the amount of qualifying wins that he got throughout the season. But it does mean that he does start near the front of the sprint race now, and he might be able, on average, to collect a couple more points than he was able to, because he is the fastest driver in Clear Air by far.
So I'm going to counter that a little bit with the whole team dynamic thing. There's no team's championship in the Porsche Tag or Esports Super Cup. Simple as that. Each driver is fighting for themselves. Yes, they've got an affiliation. Yes, they won't want to take out somebody who's from their same stable. But every one of those drivers wants to win that big prize. They want to be the champion of that championship. So let's not forget that. And also remember, at Monza, yes, it was going to be a tall order for Josh, but he got caught out in the second chicane by one of his teammates and ended up spinning around the wrong way with damage. So it can go for you and against you, can that whole having a quarter of the grid filled of stablemates. So at the end of the day, it's an individual championship, and you've got to look out for number one.
Hey, and I tell you what, we've got our own world champion in the booth, and in fact, we've got our own Coanda driver as well. So let's pose the first question to our boss, Hugo Luis. Hugo, first of all, delighted that for the first time you're appearing on camera and on microphone on the podcast, but the question is going to be around your philosophy as a driver. You've got so many teammates in that Coanda stable. What would have been your preference back in the day when you were competing in world championships? Do you like having so many teammates to work with and, share data, share tips and tricks, or do you prefer maybe being by yourself a little bit more?
Hello, and it's really a pleasure to be here with you guys. I think that's the first time you probably ever see my face here publicly on YouTube, on Twitch, and etc. in about a decade. So thank you very much for having me. And yes, I would definitely prefer to have as many teammates as possible. Developing the car is a huge part of being quick in such a competitive series. So if you have many teammates to work with, it's great. I remember back in the time when I was competing that I really due to my time zone, I couldn't practice with most of the team because of the fact that they were all based in Europe, and I'm here living in Brazil. So most of the time I could practice with Mitchell, and it was a great time because we could spend a lot of hours to develop the car. But of course, if you have the possibility of practice with a lot of teammates, that plays a huge part, because you can, of course, maybe you don't have the same driving techniques as your teammates, but certainly you can come up with the most diverse ideas about developing the car, and that plays a huge factor when, especially when you have new builds where you have to start the setup building from scratch. So it's definitely something that you need to have as many teammates as possible. That's my personal preference.
Well, I think in a car maybe like the Porsche 911 Cup car, those new builds are probably the more important thing. There's not much to tweak, but things do get updated from time to time. I think for the new Dallara IR01 car that will bring a new world championship in, that might require a little bit more of the time to figure out setup philosophies and stuff. But let's move on to a storyline here that I wanted to talk about, and that's an Apex Racing and an MSI partnership that started to bear some very, very good fruit last time out. Kevin Ellis Jr. was up in the top 5, as well as Alejandro Sanchez, and Sanchez has now been joined by a teammate for the first time in Super Cup history, Sal Batalons. And I'll ask you, Paul, first. It's always hard. Do I want to go Paul or Connery first? Paul, you were part of the qualifying series broadcast with me. We saw Talons controlling one of the qualifying races, and I think that bodes well for his teammate as he comes into this series. And it also bodes well for Apex Racing. We've got the likes of Zach Campbell coming into the series as well. Yeah. So this is a partnership I think that we want to keep our eyes out for in those opening few rounds of the championship.
Yeah, I mean, you think you've got the experience of Sanchez there. He's had that time in the championship. He's got that race win under his belt now as well. I think that was crucial for him last season, to be able to get that race win, for him to get that monkey off his back, because once you get that first win out the way, they come a lot easier after that. So he really did a stunning job to get that race win last season. I want to see that continued progression. I want to see Alejandro really push on and really challenge those Josh Rogers, Sebastian Job, even Max Benecke. Me and Connery talked to Max Benecke after the media day. He's hungry. He wants to go for this championship, so never write him off out of this either. So you've got a number of the challengers, and I think that Alejandro is the best opportunity from MSI, and he'll be able to help Salva get into that championship, guide him through learning about how the racing works in that series. But also that partnership with Apex have done a fantastic job. Kevin Ellis Jr. He just keeps on getting better and better. And he's one of their brighter prospects. Jamie Fluke is always going to be thereabouts. You got Johan Haas as well, our rallycross champion. He's in and about there. And then you've got that fresh blood coming in. Zach Campbell, never been in the World Championship. It just gives that fresh impetus to the team. It might give some new ideas to the collective. So he's really excited about that from speaking to him, and yeah, it's definitely going to be a good partnership between those. How long that partnership lasts, if they're both sort of competing at an even keel and both fighting for the championship, who knows? All's fair in love and war, but we'll have to wait and see what happens at the start of the season, see how the lie of the land is after about 3 rounds.
I've been, well, at least on this podcast, it's not going to come as a surprise to anyone, because I've mentioned it before, that I think Apex is going to be very good coming into 2021. They've just gone from strength to strength throughout the 2020 season. We had a bit of a sneak peek of their performance for 2021 during the media day. They looked very, very good indeed. And honestly, any one of their roster with the combination of MSI Esports, any one of those names can take a podium. Whether or not they can take a podium often enough to be able to make a championship challenge, that is a different issue. But if the trend that we've seen from 2020 carries over into 2021, I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing at least 1, if not 2, Apex/MSI cars challenge for the championship at the end of the season. That, I think, is going to be my call for what's going to happen in 2021. I won't name a champion just yet. I will say, though, that I think Job has a decent chance of holding on to his championship. But we all thought that with Josh Rogers after 2019. So, no one has ever defended their Porsche Tagoya Esports Super Cup title just yet. Yes, we've only had it for 2 years, but we could have a third different winner. That is entirely possible.
Well, actually, before I make a point that I want to make, I'm going to ask Hugo one more question here. Like I said, former world champion and one of only 3 members of the iRacing service to have won an iRacing Grand Prix Series World Championship I got that
you
totally
butchered
wrong.
that.
If anyone from iRacing is watching, that never happened. But like I said, the only one of 3 people to win, and that list includes the very illustrious Martin Kroenke and Gregor Hutu. What was it like for you, Hugo, going into your title defense season? Were you feeling the pressure? Because I know, talking to you, in the past, one thing that you think that was one of the reasons for your success in that season where you won the championship was your ability to get up to speed with the car very, very quickly. Did you find that you were struggling a bit more as other people evolved a little bit more, or what was one of the things that you were worried about in that winter in the off season?
Well, I honestly think that 2012 and 2013, I was still feeling very good about defending the title. I don't think I was really struggling, but I had a really serious bad luck in 2012 and 2013, especially about my internet connection. I had 2 drop connections in 2 different races in 2012. And then in the next season, I had a few incidents. I think I had a crash with Atsi Kurkov and a disconnect as well, and a clock smash at Montreal, which was very unlucky to have. I think I really start to struggle from 2014, because it was starting to get really difficult to get up to speed with the fact that I couldn't have the same time to commit to the series as I had before, and time to practice and time to put a lot of effort and dedication into the series is the key to have success. And if you don't put effort and you don't have the time and you don't have the motivation, you not get anything. And that's what played the most against me after 2 years after I got the title. But definitely when I was up to speed, it was a fantastic feeling to be competitive and be able to compete against Gregor Hutu and Martin Kroenke. It was a fantastic experience to live with, and I'm very proud of what I see today in most of the top tier series we see on our race, because we see so many competitive drivers and so many competitive teams, and we are in a completely new generation. I mean, when I look back, I start to feel old, because it was almost 10 years ago, and it's a completely new generation of drivers. You barely see any of the old school drivers from back in the time. So it's fantastic to see what we are witnessing today with the series and how the drivers are able to develop themselves. It's something that we didn't have back in the time, and we see all the coaching going on and all the other projects that teams have been working with. It's fantastic.
I'm not going to talk too much about age, but just a reminder that there are World Championship drivers, or rather drivers aiming to qualify for World Championships, aged just 13 years old. So that is just absolutely crazy. They are younger than my dog, who is having a very nice nap behind me right now. But let's move on to our final storyline from the last season of the Esports Super Cup, and that was, for lack of a better term, and I don't think Dom Duhan is going to appreciate this too much, but Redline struggles. It was a torrid year for Redline. I mean, Maximilian Benecke, the only shining light for them in a season where more than half of their drivers ended up getting relegated from the series. And Connery, we've talked about this on just so many occasions so far, but I think it's already looking a little bit more promising for 2021. There are a few Redline drivers that are coming up into the series, and like I mentioned a little bit ago, Patrick Holtzman, who's left Red Bull Esports, is joining Team Redline, so that's going to add to their, effort in this series, and I think the team is hoping and feeling refreshed about their chances this year.
Yeah, the addition of Holtzman is going to be a big, big help, because at least as far as I'm concerned, they've only ever had one driver that's capable of podiums, and that is Maximilian Benecke. So to have him as part of the team would really help because it gives Beneke a bit of a wingman. So that's the situation up there at the very front. As far as their other two drivers, Alexander Tiber, Christopher Dambeats, they haven't really shown to me so far. Even in the 2020 season, that they're able to sort of break into that top 5, which is where you need to be to win a championship. But Team Redline, at least I think, are hoping that the first couple of rounds of the season actually gets off to a better start than last season, because I think they were always just kind of kicking themselves about the start of the season. They were always trying to come from behind, and that is a different mentality. That's a mentality that causes you to make more mistakes. Those mistakes just compound on top of each other, and so we talk about sim racing being a very mental game at times. I think they just kind of had a poor start last season and weren't able to find any sort of next gear to try to recover. So the start of the season is going to be important for those guys. But I think for Max Beneke, he knows that he has this reputation of always being the bridesmaid rather than the bride. He's had numerous second places throughout top level competition. He's always been there fighting within the top couple positions in the Posocco Esports Super Cup. Even some of the other BMW and Porsche events, he's been almost there, but not quite. He's always come second place, especially like during BMW Sim Live sorts of situations as well. So I think his hunger for a championship is just going to grow the longer that he goes without one, because knowing Max, he's going to he's going to take it quite forcefully, I think. At times, he's not really going to take any prisoners, and how that will work out for him coming into this 2021 season, I don't know, but it should be exciting.
And Paul, I think Connor makes a good point there. It's all about how Beneke is going to challenge that energy. We saw him and Rogers getting together on a number of occasions last season. It resulted in Beneke missing one round of the championship. And if you want to challenge for a championship, missing a round, being suspended is a no-go. You cannot afford for that to happen. I think it's important for Beneke to go in there from that first round of the season, set his intentions right off the bat. He struggled in qualifying in the first 2 rounds of the series last year, and I think if he can improve on those performances, with qualifying being so important, that will set him up very nicely. And we all know he's got the pace, he's got the talent. It's all now just about things coming together nicely out on track.
I mean, don't forget, he did win both the sprint and feature race at Barcelona last season in the championship. So he showed that he can, if he's at the front, he's difficult to beat. Very difficult to beat. He is one of those drivers. I think it's that working your way through the field can sometimes maybe catch him out, and I think that's where maybe Sebastian Job and Josh Rogers do have a little bit of an edge over him. But if he's up at the front there, he is a fiery competitor and he will not give up that easy. Just touching on Redline as a whole, just to go back to the point that Connor is making, I think what didn't help them last season was what happened in the world. Because they had a certain driver from Formula 1, Max Verstappen, who, with the way that the calendar was panned out, was going to be available for every round of the championship. He was their wild card in that whole championship because he qualified. Nobody can say he was gifted a championship position. He was qualified. But unfortunately, with what happened in the world, things changed. The calendar for Formula 1 changed and he couldn't compete any longer. I think Redline really missed out on having him in and around that team, bringing that mentality, because to be able to compete at the top in Formula 1, you have to have a completely different mentality to, say, me just joining an official race for a bit of fun. It is just that, it takes it to that other level. And I think Beneke really can help drive that team forward, and getting Patrick Holtzman in there is going to help them a lot. I was a little bit disappointed with how Patrick competed last season, if I'm honest, compared to when you compare him to his teammates of Sebastian Job and Graham Carroll. I don't think that I think he will be the first to admit that he didn't perform at the height of his level, his commitment and his level. So 2021 is going to be a real make or break year for Patrick Holtzman and for that Redline team.
And I've just thought of something as well. Connor, you mentioned the season that Holtzman had this year. It wasn't that he had a terrible season, Paul. It was just that, unlike Job, who was able to be consistent, Holtzman was very inconsistent. He had one race, I believe, towards the tail end of the season where he had a very, very impressive result. Like the type of drive where you think this is a championship caliber driver, but you need to be able to do that week in and week out. And now he's got a new team behind him. You have to think maybe the mentality's reset. Maybe he's using this winter to, like Job did a year ago, change a few things in the way he approaches sim racing. And he's going to, come into a new year, bang in form, and hopefully 9th of January, we really see Redline returning to the top level of iRacing World Championships.
Yeah, I think it's healthy for them to be at least somewhat near the top because, they are one of the most historic teams in sim racing. They've been going on they've been an organization for donkey's years at this point. They are one of the oldest teams in sim racing, and to have them performing at a top level consistently is just going to be beneficial for the team because, you want those long-lived organizations at the very top, because you don't want people just coming in, becoming a team for like 2 or 3 years and then just backing out. We want that consistent presence in the scene, and that's what Team Redline have done very, very well. It's just, as far as iRacing goes, at least, they've been missing the mark recently. Of course, they've seen a little bit of a resurgence because of Maximilian Bernecker joining the team a couple of years ago. That's when they started coming back more to the forefront. But it's a case that they're almost there rather than actually there at this point. And I hope they're able to turn it around because we need these sorts of teams in iRacing and sim racing.
Well, let's take a look at the 20 drivers who've locked themselves in from last year's championship then. So these are 20 drivers who didn't have to do much work over the winter, and it includes the likes of Sebastian Job, Joshua Rogers, and Alejandro Sanchez. Top 3 in last year's championship. Take a look at those team names as well. You'll see a lot of familiar faces from Coanda Simsport. And Hugo, I'm going to ask you here, not about Coanda, but you just look at that list of names, and it's interesting that you see some of the same faces that you would have been competing with, almost a decade ago, but then a lot of new faces as well. It's good to see this mixture of, the old and the new mixing in together at the top level.
Yeah, certainly. We're still watching here a transition between the old and the new generation here in sim racing, and it's fantastic to see how both generations are being able to work together. And we can see through all these years that these new names such as Sanchez, Benneker, who else, Jeff Giassi, these are new names in the sim racing world right now, and they are definitely making their names. Sindra Setas, and it's amazing to see how we are being able to watch the transition between both generations, and it's also something interesting to note that we can see on track a different mental approach to the races. I still think that some of the new drivers are still kind of struggling with their decision making on track. Maybe they can wait more laps to try a move or try a dive bomb or something like this, but of course that will come with the experience and the next few years of having on track time with a lot of these guys.
I want to say as well, from that list of drivers, Dame Warren, I mean, he did miss the Spa season, and he was unfortunate session, should I say, due to power issues in Australia, where he was living. Dame Warren really did a good year last season, really had a good debut season, and finished 6th in the championship. If he can carry on that progression forward, he could be a challenger for at least top 5 or maybe even the podium finish in the end of the championship. So he's somebody to look out for, I feel, from that list of drivers who automatically qualified from last season.
Well, you talk about Coanda, and I think it's two other drivers who have newly qualified themselves up into the series who might pose a greater challenge for the championship hunt this year. Let's take a look at those 20 new drivers, and the two that I'm going to call out here are, first off, Charlie Collins, who dominated the first 3 rounds of the championship, qualifying championship, effectively secured his place, and then let the foot off the throttle for the final 2 rounds. The other name to keep your eye out for, though, is Ian Chan Guvin, the real-life Mobile 1 Super Cup driver, qualified in 15th position, so he's going to add a very strong dynamic to the Coanda team. And Paul, you had the privilege of being with me, not being with me rather, but being part of the broadcast for this qualifying series. And the reason I say that is you are going to be on the call once again next year for the Super Cup, and I think this was a great opportunity for you to see some of these new drivers in action for the first time, but also the likes of, Thomas Tattler, Brian Lockwood, Alexander Thebe, drivers who had to secure qualification once again. And in the likes of Thomas Tattler, really went out there and impressed me in just how much they improved in this offseason.
Yeah, and you've got to remember, it's a different mentality, though, in the qualifiers, because everybody's scared out there on track. They're scared that one little mistake can cost them that World Championship spot. It nearly happened to so many. It did happen to Pete Berriman. He was such a really good driver in those qualifiers, and unfortunately got involved in a couple of incidents and didn't qualify. I felt that he would have been a really good addition to the championship, but that's not how the qualifiers worked, and this is what we've ended up with. I'm really impressed with people like Moreno Sorica myself. I think him being in there, he was in the round, he qualified nice and early, along with Pinto as well. Those two have a really good shot from that Williams Esports team. But Brian Lockwood, it was interesting to chat to him after the media day with Connery. I've not really spent that much time speaking to Brian before, and it was a really interesting perspective that he had on the championship and his approach to the championship. And he was unfortunate with how he didn't automatically qualify from last season. So I am glad that he's back in the championship after what happened last season.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stories. You have Sorica, obviously last year's Porsche Esports Sprint Challenge champion. Lockwood, who had to miss a round due to his own issues in registering for a session. But Connery, I want to ask you a question here. There's interesting storylines. You've got Williams returning in a big way to a World Championship competition. You've also got another Spanish influx. You've got Ricardo Rico, Carlos Fenalosa, who aren't part of the MSI team, but as mentioned before, Salva Talent, he qualified up in 6th. I'm very excited for some of these storylines. What's the main team that you're keeping your eye out for from this list of 20 drivers? There's also Kova, who have, burst onto the scene recently. So there's a lot of new teams that I'm excited to see what they choose to do in World Championship competitions.
Yeah, Williams Esports are always going to be exciting. I think this has been a task for them for a while to get back into the World Championship sort of things, because the GT World Championship not being a thing anymore, unfortunately, and the team racing was one of their stronger events rather than just this single driver sort of sprint racing that we have going on here. So Williams Esports coming back to the forefront is going to be beneficial. Again, we need more diversity in terms of the teams at the front of the grid, and it's fantastic to see them back. You quite rightfully mentioned Kova as well, who have really come in over the course of 2020 and said, we are the best Finnish sim racing team out there. And they've got the drivers to go and prove that as well. They have all the top Finnish talent driving for them at the moment, and they are a Finnish esports organization as well. So they're not just in sim racing; they're in other games as well. So to have that support behind them is going to be so beneficial for those drivers that perhaps aren't used to that sort of structured support behind the scenes. And I'm very interested to see how far that'll push them. So Kova are going to be looking amazing coming into this. Of course, we had the new representative from MSI Esports as Alpha Talons as well coming in. You mentioned all the Spanish sim racers coming in as well. So, I mean, we saw what they are capable of as a country. Of course, with Alejandro Sanchez getting himself his first World Championship win, and it's the first World Championship win for a Spanish driver in 2020. And now you're seeing a lot of the other Spanish drivers really come to the forefront now. And for a region that has had a lot of talent for so many years, but that talent hasn't been displayed in the top level competition, it is absolutely fantastic to see these Spanish drivers up there, because they are a big group of drivers when it comes to just iRacing in general, but they've never really had that sort of representation in the biggest series. But now that's starting to change, so for those guys it's going to be incredible.
So that's a quick recap of the past season of the Porsche Tacor Esports Super Cup and a brief window into the next year as well. We're just a couple of weeks away from getting that season kicked off. The 9th of January will be the first round, and we head to Interlagos, where the qualifying series wrapped up just a couple of weeks ago. So that's going to be a very interesting one to keep your eye out for. A slightly new schedule as we run from January to April. So that opens the door for that second World Championship that will introduce the brand new Dallara IR01 car to the World Championship ranks. So that's 2 World Championships recapped, and now let's talk about 2020 as a whole, because it was a huge year for us here at RaceSpotTV, and, well, I only got to be part of it since April, and I've already been a part of almost 130 events. It has been, crazy. We've just had event after event after event, and the 5 of us that you see up on your screen are very excited that we got to be a small part of this. Let's start with you, Evan, though, because you got to be part of history. Guinness World Record history as well. The NASCAR broadcast on FS1 with the eNASCAR Pro Invitational was the first time that iRacing was on national TV, and we set world records. What was that like for you to be a part of in what was a very, very frustrating time for you personally as well?
It was weird, because a lot of things were changing. Obviously, that was at kind of the height of the pandemic. And it's funny because, we had Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon call the races, but I think Jeff was in Germany. So I got a call and they're like, hey, they don't know if Jeff can get into the States in time, if they're going to let him come back. So we might need you to call them. So I was going to be available anyways. And then Jeff made it back. So I was, helping out with the drivers and, just casually talking with Joey Logano and all those guys and helping them get set up in our TeamSpeak so we could interview them. And that translated from the Pro Invitational stuff to Wednesday Night iRacing on FS1. Got to know Ron Capps pretty well as well, which is, kind of crazy. It was just cool to see those guys come over to the sim world, and it was, just such a surreal experience to be doing what I normally help out with on the broadcast, and even with the Porsche stuff as well. But if I look to my right, like we were on national TV, right? Like it was a crazy thing. And it was just super cool to help out with. I'm now collecting I'm a big NASCAR diecast fan, so I'm now getting all the diecasts that they made from the Pro Invitational series as like a memento, if you will, of being able to work on those. We also did the IndyCar stuff as well, which I helped out on. So I mean, that's cool stuff, right? Didn't have much of a choice because I couldn't do anything else because there was no other work happening outside of the sim world. So, you have the pros and the cons of every situation. And I think that this year has really highlighted making the best out of what you've got, right? And I think that, I had the opportunity to do that, being involved in so many cool projects, not just on the TV side, but, here on RaceSpot as well, doing all kinds of events. But I think that's a good analogy for kind of the year as whole for the sim racing community.
And how about you, Connor? It was a year where I think you would have wanted to celebrate a bit more. You graduated university, which is a big year for anyone, but I'm sure your celebrations were a bit more muted. You've started to set up your post-university life now as you try and pursue this career in, broadcasting. What's it been like for you? You had the opportunity to work on the likes of Cup of Nations, that Red Line event. You've got to commentate on a lot of drivers that you would have wanted to commentate on in the real world, but maybe thought that was going to come down the road in maybe a few years' time.
Yeah, it was. I just got to say, I did get my certificate of my degree, so there we go.
Hey, congratulations. There we go.
But I would have liked to receive it at a more usual time. shall we say, like with the whole graduation ceremony and everything. But I think, given the current situation, those aren't really possible at the moment. But yeah, back to the sim racing. It's been a pretty crazy year as far as I'm concerned. It's been a year of a lot of personal development for me as well. That is for certain. You know, got to do some absolutely amazing things this year, and you know, being part of the whole Porsche race day thing, which is a term only I'm using, but I'm desperately trying to make it a thing. But of course, working on the Porsche Esports Strength Challenge, also co-hosting and commentating for one round of the World Championship for the first time. That was absolutely incredible. I couldn't tell you how nervous I was before that particular broadcast, because there was a lot of expectation, mostly just from myself, because I really wanted to do the best job possible, as we all want to do on all of our own broadcasts. But I think sim racing this year, despite everything going on, has gone from strength to strength. I think there's always been a year-on-year improvement as far as the whole sim racing scene goes, but we just got a pretty big boost this year, and hopefully that sort of momentum carries on over into next year as well, where, you know, pandemic situation pending, you know, maybe towards the end of the year we can start getting live events back in, and doing those sorts of big races and big events, because that's really what makes things so exciting is, you know, the viewers reacting to everything, and the community aspect as well, going in person and meeting some of these drivers and teams, and, you know, having a good time. At some point we can go back to that, but for now, the way things are right now, with sim racing just getting better and better, and the racing in general and the personalities getting so much more interesting as well, I still think we're in a good spot.
I think we are indeed. Paul, how about you? It was a year where you had to start working from home. There were some interesting stuff. Another year where you had multiple world championships on your plate. The Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup, where did you get to work with someone you'd been listening to for a very long time on national TV?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was another sort of pinch the back of your hand sort of moment. Getting to work with Martin Haven, who I'd listened to for he'll hate me saying this, for decades. He's just one of those people that you look up to when you're watching motorsport on TV as an aspiring commentator. And I after the first broadcast, and I even said this to Connery after because myself, Connery and Martin had a bit of a debrief after the first race. I said, once Martin had gone, I said to Connery, I have got so much to learn. I was just not on his level. He brought such a high level, I felt, last season, and it basically gave me a kick up the backside, if I'm honest, because I'd commentated, I'd been the lead commentator of the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup in 2019. I then moved to being a colour commentator this year. Next year, I'm going to have the pleasure of working once again with Connery. He's going to be on our broadcast next year. We're also going to have Matthew Trevette, which, if people don't know that name, you'll know this name, Sadakist. He's going to be joining the commentary booth for next season's Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup. I think it's really good having that mix of people who are experienced in the sim, like myself and Connery, and bringing those people from outside, because it gives you more range. It gives you a broader outlook on those broadcasts. I think you saw that with the Coca-Cola eNASCAR series as well. Bringing those outside voices in really did add something to those broadcasts. Also, being able to produce live television from this room here, that was incredible. I never thought I'd be doing that, but that's what we did for the Mobile One Porsche Super Cup Virtual Edition earlier this year on European and international television. So again, that was something I never expected to happen this year. I did miss the Sim Racing Expo. I did miss that as an event. I went to my first one last year. It was a tremendous event to go to and to, I say, work. Yes, it was a lot of work in the world's hottest commentary box, but it was so much fun. being able to meet all the community, and that is something that I missed this year, is not being able to meet up with the community, to chat with people, to just see how people are getting on. You know, it was always nice to work those events, and not being able to do in person the BMW Sim Live this year, which we did last year on the precarious steps of Doom for me and Connery up there in the commentary box. But yeah, the future's bright for sim racing. I think there's got to be some progression forward. We need to, you know, grab the bull by the horns. We've been able to show ourselves to the world this year. It was an unexpected challenge, but we've got to now say, right, how do we better ourselves? How do we improve ourselves? How do we get our niche, because it is very much a niche, is sim racing, into the wider market, into the bigger market there, and really make it a huge thing that it deserves to be. And I think one of the key things that Evan picked up on with the NASCAR drivers is make these drivers, get these drivers out there, really make them stars. They deserve to be stars with the amount of effort and preparation that they put in there. It's not easy to win a world championship. It's not easy to get into a world championship. So these drivers deserve the recognition that they truly deserve to get.
And to wrap it all off, then, Hugo Louis. And Hugo, you've had an interesting 2020. It's been up and down. I think the biggest up for you might have been the arrival of a brand new puppy in your household that I know has brought a lot of joy to you and your wife. But for RaceSpot as a company, it's been a great year. So many opportunities, so many chances to work with established brands and to develop, you know, new and further existing relationships as well. And the addition of 2 new producers that are making your life a little bit easier as well. Talk to us about your 2020 and what 2021 holds, not just for you, but RaceSpot as well, because we're very excited about everything that we're working on in secret that we can't talk about. And there's a lot in the pipeline that everyone who's tuning into our broadcast, I know Will's going to hate me for that, but everyone that tunes in is going to be enjoying in the new year.
Yeah, certainly 2020 has been a very interesting year in the most diverse aspects that we have ever seen, in bad and good ways. But yeah, well, I have been involved mostly with broadcasting in 2020 than ever. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to work into so many important events, and with the unfortunate happenings in the world that has given the chance to sim racing to achieve the next level. And of course, nobody was kind of totally prepared for that. Of course, everyone will put everyone's best into it, but nobody was expecting that you would have such a boom in just 1 month, 2 months. And it was certainly a pleasure to work with so many real-life organizations and companies that are involved in the real-life motorsport scene. It has been a real pleasure to be part of so many amazing projects that we have been involved. And yeah, certainly I see good things happening in 2021. I know that, of course, many of us are like sim racing addicts, and we love what we do. I think that the most important thing is that we are not doing all of this because of money. We are not doing this just because of job or work. We do this because we love this. How many years we have been doing that without getting any profits? I mean, we do that because we love sim racing, and we want to make sim racing big, and we want to make sim racing something that the general population can see and watch and enjoy, and see that it's something that they can do at the comfort of their homes, and they can enjoy it as the same feeling as if they were doing real life racing. That's what sim racing is, and that's what I honestly want it to be. And if we can do anything to keep improving it, we will certainly work our best to do that. So I expect a lot of good things to 2021. Of course, well, with the way 2020 has been, we don't know what's gonna happen next month, but we certainly hope the best. I hope the best. And with so many things that we have been seeing, that we are learning from the real life racing to the sim racing aspects of things, both in the simulation aspects and also the broadcasting side of things. I know that we surely can take the next step, and I'm surely looking forward to that, and I'm really looking forward to the next year and see what can happen.
So let's wrap it up then with quick fire question rounds. And you see all of our faces up here. I made sure not to tell any of these guys what was happening until just a few seconds ago. So they've not had a chance to think about this. The answers they're going to give you are the first things that have sprung into their mind. So let's start with you, Connery Maddock.
Okay.
Quick fire question round. Everyone gets the same question. So the other three commentators are going to get an opportunity. I will flip the order for the second. I will flip the order for the second.
I like this
round.
order. It works with me.
Yeah.
So Connery.
Okay, go on.
It's been a great year for iRacing. So many bits of content. The development team has done a great job, and we must shout them out for pushing through so many new things in such a tough year for them in terms of their working conditions, to try and get data, to try and get scans. What's your favorite bit of content? And to make your life easier, I'll give you 10 seconds because I'll go first. The brand new Dallara IR18 with tire compounds and everything is a treat. And thank you to everyone there that has made the IndyCar so much fun to drive. Connery, your turn.
My new favorite bit of content is the IR01. Even though for a lot of people it's in a little bit of an awkward spot right now, where there's continuing development on it. It's more of a beta product at this point. But once it gets to a good state, I think any potential World Championship at the end of 2021 is going to be an absolute blast. So IR01 for sure, because we've been waiting for a high-powered open-wheel car that's doesn't require a science degree to be able to set up.
Evan, you next.
I think Long Beach. I know that it's been around as a tech track for so long, but it is such a massive undertaking, and it is such a beautiful track. I've driven the IR01 there. I've driven NASCAR stock cars. I've driven everything at Long Beach. It just looks incredible. I will give an honorable mention though to iRacing Super Speedway because it's just dumb fun. But Long Beach is one of the pieces of content in the last couple of years that's just blown me away when I checked it out for the first time.
Paul Smith.
I'm going to throw a curveball here. Finally, getting Rallycross at Brands Hatch. I've been wanting that for years because I grew up watching Martin Shanker and people like that listening to Murray Walker on commentary with all the dirt and the debris, and it was fantastic, brilliant stuff. And I'm glad to see that we've got Rallycross at Brands Hatch. Not the same layout as they used to have back in the 70s and 80s, but still brilliant stuff, and I love it. It's a fantastic track.
It's a fantasy layout, but like you say, fantastic track. Finally then, Hugo, what's your favorite bit of content?
Long Beach, for sure. I mean, I haven't driven a lot of cars lately, just the newest release from the last build, but the track itself has we need to prize iRacing for their job in that track. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. The level of the details, and I mean, it's funny that many people year after year they were posting on the forums, Long Beach, when is it never gonna happen? And then boom, take that. So it's fantastic. The track is absolutely amazing to drive, and that's my favorite piece of content.
It doesn't just drive fantastic as well, but in terms of FPS performance, very, very good, especially compared to Nashville, which I found out a week ago really, really likes to hammer my PC. So one final question. It's time to pull the curtain up just a little bit here. And I want to ask each of you, what was your most terrifying moment during a broadcast in 2020? Because this was my first year of broadcasting, and I've already got a number of stories. So I'll kick us off here. And it was during a Porsche Esports Super Cup broadcast where we helped produce the Esports Sprint Challenge portion of the broadcast. And literally 60 seconds before we're about to go live, I tell Paul Smith and Will Vincent, guys, we're about to go live, get ready. And then my computer dies. So cue frantic, me in the background as I try and get my computer back up, try and message them on Facebook saying, guys, I'm coming back. The stream is still live on my second PC and don't worry. And then about 2 minutes later, everything's fine. I'm back in the session and we're going. But it gave me a heart attack on what was one of my first World Championship broadcasts. We're going to flip it around this time. Hugo, you get to go first.
Well, maybe I don't have many terrifying moments this year because I delegated so many stuff to the new guys. Thank you, Arjuna. Thank you, Tyler. But certainly, I mean, we know that this is all about remote broadcasting, so anything can go wrong. Everyone is remote. The commentators, the feeds, and the computers. You have the internet, you have power supplies. You don't know what's going to happen. So every time you see maybe someone's internet dropping out or having packet loss, it's already something that give you panic attacks. But yeah, I don't remember from the top of my head this year a moment like this. But maybe I can mention last year, Daytona Coke Series.
Oh.
Oh my God, that. I gotta say though, I got better for a bit here. That was, I think, you know, for those of us that were watching that race at the time, like I think all of us had our hearts drop to the floor and just go, "Oh no!" Like I'm not like I can't imagine how that must have felt for you. Like that must have been the worst.
I'm still doing
part
therapy.
of broadcasting. Yeah. Jeez.
So there's Hugo Luis recounting Daytona as last year being when his power dropped out, for those who don't know what we're talking about, and you missed the final lap of the season opener of the eNASCAR series. That's the moment he's talking about. Paul Smith, then, you've had I think, a relatively easy year by comparison to that.
I'm struggling to think of any terrifying moments. I'll be honest with you, it's very rare that I even get nervous before a broadcast. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's experience, you know, the grey hair's starting to come through. But
all those years of Kung Fu?
Well, I mean, you know, when you are an international Kung Fu superstar, then I don't know. But
RaceSpot that
Anyway, my soul dies every time I hear that. I'd say the most stressful time that I had was actually before the opening round of the ESM Championship, the European Sim Racing Masters, because it's the first time I've ever had to produce a broadcast with no commentators. I was just purely presenting, producing the coverage, and sending that then to Hugo or Randy or Connery or whoever was then taking that feed, providing an English stream and a Spanish stream for that championship. I'd never worked on my own like that. I was completely isolated, and it was a case of, right, got to make sure the timings are right, got to hit every mark completely right. We did. But yeah, it was the most sort of I've got sort of worked up in terms of just making sure, put the pressure on me a bit. But but again, it's not one of those things where I really get nervous about things. I just you prepare so much. So I mean, I did have another stressful one was setting up a Friday night primetime broadcast when Connery's internet decided to die 5 minutes before the race was due to start.
Yeah, that was as soon as I hit go live, that's when the stream dropped.
It's always the worst possible timing. And I've had to jump in for others as well. I know just how stressful that one was, so I can feel that tension, Paul, and I need to learn from you.
I got the start of the race.
You did.
So that was Paul Smith. Evan, you've had moments on TV then. Anything particularly go wrong in those broadcasts, or was there anything that's gone wrong this year for you across of all of the different things you've got to cover?
I'm surprised Hugo's answer wasn't when I tell him that RSR's racing at Martinsville, because I know that's always a scary one. But I remember when we were doing the IndyCar series for NBCSN, and I was spotting, and this taught me to not trust the timing software. Because we were kind of figuring out what the pitch strategy was going to be, and Will Power was somewhere towards the front of the field. And on my timing screen, my sim events screen, it said that Will Power had pitted. So I let everybody know Will Power's in. 5 seconds later, Lee Diffie's on TV saying, Will Power down pit road. He didn't actually pit. It was just a glitch with my timing information. So that was the okay part is I don't think anybody at home noticed because we didn't actually show it because we knew pretty quickly, oh, Evan's just an idiot. And then he actually pitted like 2 laps later. So for the rest of the broadcast, they're all going, yeah, Will Power pitted on lap 20, whenever I said it. And he actually pitted like 2-3 laps later. But that felt pretty dumb. So always double check if a car is on pit road before you tell the producer of a TV event that the car is on pit road. That's what I learned.
Connery, how about you then?
I think I spoiled mine already with what I said earlier. But the run up to the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup race at Brands Hatch, which I was play-by-play. That was the most nervous. That's the most terrified I've ever been. And this year, anyway, because in 2019, I guess you could say the final of the Sim Racing Expo was probably a little bit more terrifying because there's it's a big venue and there's loads of people in the spectator stands watching and everything like that. But at least for this year, it was the World Championship. Play-by-play because I've always looked up to people like Will, for example, in the old World Championship Grand Prix series. I watched that a lot before I even got into sim racing commentary, and I always thought like it would be so cool. It would be so cool if I could do that. That would be absolutely amazing. And of course, hearing Evan on the eNASCAR broadcast as well. Always an inspiration. Paul, working with you in the 2019 season as well. That's all these little things just contribute to me wanting to do that, and I finally got the opportunity to do it. And yeah, I was nervous as hell. And thank you for your encouragement throughout that broadcast, Paul, because I know you messaged me like partway through saying, you're doing well, don't worry. I'm like, thank you.
I mean, you did manage to move East Grinstead up into Scotland, that broadcast, but
I did.
We'll forget that.
That was my one blunder. I had 2 blunders. I had the Scottish one, and I had the one that saying that Josh also won at like Mid-Ohio, but we didn't have Mid-Ohio this season. It was another American racetrack. But yeah, apart from those 2 things, I think I did well.
I can speak to that nervousness. I got to fill in for Paul, who had a poor voice for a Rallycross World Championship broadcast on 24 hours notice. So
yeah,
not much time to panic. Was fortunate there, but not much time to prep either. So thank you very much for that, Paul. I am surprised. We had 4 different members of the RaceSpot team that were all present for the first round this season of the Porsche Esports Super Cup, and no one mentioned what we had in that round and all the chaos of that.
I think we prefer to forget that round. I think.
Fair enough.
Like we don't speak of that time.
Okay, the time that never happened. Got it.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank Evan Posocco, Paul Smith, and Hugo Luis for joining us today. It was so much fun to run down 2020, preview very briefly 2021 as well. And guys, RaceSpot TV is always so fun being on RaceSpot with you guys, and I'm very much looking forward to 2021 as well. But let's wrap up then for 2020, talking tents and our 10-episode run. It's been fantastic for us to be joined by some of the greatest on the iRacing service and some of the greatest off the iRacing service as well. We've had Martin Asher joining us, the likes of Will Vincent as well, in addition to so many World Championship drivers. Let's preview one final weekend of racing then live on RaceSpot TV, as we only have 2 broadcasts, and they're both on Christmas Day. So doubleheader of official competition. It's first the Indy Pro 2000 Series as they head to their first oval race of the season, New Hampshire Motor Speedway. Right after that, you can catch Friday Night Primetime, which follows the brand new Dallara IR01 car as it heads to Silverstone for round 2 of 12. Time to say goodbye then for the final time this year. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, and for Connery Maddock, Hugo Luis, and the entire team at RaceSpot TV, happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2021.